is a lot of repetition. You know, our brain needs a lot of repetition and a lot of patterns, and then they're going to read it after that. Like I try to teach teachers, number one, that the decodable is the protein of the lesson, and number two, that the decodable reading part is like going to the gym and doing reps. Like you don't just go to the gym and like lift a weight and walk out. Like you lift a weight times, you rest, you go back 12 more times, and then you go to the gym tomorrow, and then you go to the gym the day after that. Like you continue to get better and stronger by doing it over and over and over. And since the decodable book only has SH patterns plus previously taught skills, it doesn't have any vowel tunes in there at all. Like it only has skills up to that point and no further. There's like 99 to 100% success with kids reading the decodable because
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we record this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rainbow Skies for Teachers. Today's episode is such a special one because we're joined by someone many of you will already know and love, Jen Jones from Hello Literacy. If you spend any time in the literacy space online, you've likely come across Jen's work. She's become a trusted voice for teachers navigating the science of reading, and for good reason. In this episode, Jen breaks down what the research actually means for the real classroom, and we talk about grouping by skill instead of level, smarter ways to assess, we're all about working smarter, not harder here, and how to use decodable text well and why mapping sight words changes the game. But more than that, this conversation is about giving yourself permission to grow, to try new approaches, and to embrace the messy middle of change. It's practical, empowering, and packed with clarity. So let's dive in and start our chat with Jen. It's so great to have you on the podcast, Jen. So we're going to dive straight in with our first question for you. So many teachers are hearing about the science of reading, but there's still confusion about what it really means. So how would you define the science of reading in a simple, teacher-friendly way?
Right. So I agree with you. It is kind of a new term for teachers, and we do get caught up in education. We do get caught up with acronyms and names of things without accurately like defining what they are. And I think the easiest and most simplest way to define the science of reading is an old thing with a new name.
Yep.
It's really been a culmination. It is a culmination of research. It's a body of research, obviously a figurative body of research that goes all the way back to the 1950s, 1960s. And somewhere along the way, we took a turn away from phonics and foundational literacy and went more for the touchy-feely, like kids are going to absorb and learn how to read by just reading them lots of cool books and, you know, growing as readers. And I think we've realized that we shouldn't have gone left when we should have gone right. But fortunately, there's so many mid-course corrections that we can make right now that are easy to implement and easy to put in place. And I don't necessarily feel like you need a lot of the science of reading jargon. I think a lot of that is reserved for teacher knowledge, not necessarily that we have to teach all of that stuff to kids, but as long as we understand it ourselves, we can make some of those shifts. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it, isn't it? It's that body of research that they've gone and said, this is a really great way that our brains learn how to read, and this is what we can do to teach that instruction.
Yeah. And there is a little bit of a stigma around it because it is a little bit discongruent from the way education departments taught teachers how to teach reading. So, and even from everything I've read and everything I've learned about it, even the professors in the College of Neuroscience or, neurodiversity or special education, speech pathology, and all the other departments that sort of make up all of the research that's feeding into the body of research. Even they don't agree on everything. And even they can't keep up with their own research, let alone that of 7 other fields. So it all kind of falls on educators because we are the practitioners, the ones sort of serving it up to kids when it's all kind of coming at us from 19 different angles. So we have to sort of muck through all of that and decide which is the data-driven pieces that we can replicate in our classroom. They're going to get us the results that the research says we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we have people like you in the world to help us understand it.
I try to
take
for everybody.
Take that research and show us what the practicality looks like, in the classroom, which we'll unpack further on. So If there's one simple shift you can make to align your instruction to this science of reading research, it's learning to group your students differently. So I guess we're used to grouping kids based on reading levels. So tell us what we need to do with grouping students.
Right. So before you can group your students by skill, which is the new shift, we're
Yeah.
shifting away from grouping them by a level or a number or a star or a color, which doesn't tell us anything. We're going to shift to grouping them by a skill. But before we can group them by a skill, we need a roadmap of the skills. And that's called a scope and sequence, a phonics skill scope and sequence. And I use the term skill, like we as educators use the term skill and strategy a lot. A strategy is something that you can or cannot do. You can measure that you can do it, or that you can measure that you can't do it. And that goes with cooking or riding a bike or sewing or crocheting or knowing, consonant blends or whatever. It doesn't matter what the skill is. You can either do it or you can't. A strategy is something that you use to help you learn the skill, but you don't necessarily need it. I say it's like a tool in a shed.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go to the shed if you don't need the tool, and if you don't need the tool, great, then you need it at all. But when I use the term skill, scope, and sequence, and a phonics skill, scope, and sequence, I mean like short vowels, long vowels, consonant blends, soft C and G, those types of phonics skills. And I think some teachers think like, well, what kind of skills do they need? And ironically, we don't think about phonics being like 100 skills from simple to complex that kids need to know in order to know how to read. So that's important. You need a skill roadmap and a scope and sequence. And I don't know about Australia, but in the United States in 2009, we had a whole new national curriculum that came out called Common Core Standards. And even the foundational literacy standards did not detail the phonics skills that kids needed to know in order from simple to complex. I say 100, but even if you count soft C and G as 4 or 2, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. It just was just very vague. And, I've been in education for 32 years, and I was in the classroom for 16 before I became a literacy coach. And I crossed every T and dotted every I, and whatever I was supposed to teach, I taught it. And had somebody handed me a phonics skill scope and sequence back then, I would have been like, no problem. Run for your life. Let's do this. But nobody ever did. And so I think in my researching the science of reading, I'm thinking to myself, well, where is this master document? Where is this, where is this thing that's going to tell me what kids need to know and in what order? And there was a few out there. There's just not a universal one. And researchers sort of agree that there should be a simple to complex phonics skill scope and sequence. And it's okay that they vary slightly. But before we can group students by skill, we need to know the complete list of skills they need to know. And then we need to assess which ones they do and which ones they don't know so that we can group them. And there are different phonics placement assessments out there.
Yeah.
But in true me fashion, I created one. So I created a phonics skill scope and sequence.
Yep.
Simple to complex patterns. That's a free download on my site. And then I also created an assessment. And the assessment that I created originally was 12 sentences because I have 12 units in my phonics curriculum, and the decodables are in 12 sections. And each sentence contains words that contain the phonics skills that kids need to know. So if you don't pass the sentence, then that tells you which skills in there they don't know. And then you place them into that skill group because of that skill set that they don't have. And so you basically discontinue the assessment when they get below 90%, since we're going for mastery. We want kids to be at 90% or above on the assessment. And we place them back into that group. And the groups are like short vowel groups. And then we have, CVC with 2-syllable words like hot dog, laptop, things like that. Then we get a little bit more complicated with consonant blends and so on and so forth. So that's the grouping. And a lot of teachers say, okay, great, science of reading, how I group my students differently, but how do I group them? And that's probably the biggest question that teachers ask. So I'm glad you're asking it. And that assessment is free as well. So, and also, yes, I'm sorry. And also this year, I created an alternate assessment because what was happening with the sentence assessment was that we were getting some false positives because some students are sight readers.
Yeah.
And they can look at a sentence and use the context and their background knowledge to sort of guess what the sentence would be, even though the sentences were not completely nonsensical, but it might say something like 8 elephants traveled to town for the circus or something like that. Like it was, or over the bridge to town or something like that. It made sense, but it wasn't necessarily something that they would ever have read before. But I think
Yep.
some kids do by second grade, by end of first grade, they can sort of
Yes.
guess their way through the
Yep.
sentence. Yeah. So I created an alternate assessment this year that's just an isolated word list of 10 words that contain the skills in that set. So you cannot rely on context and you cannot model your way through, and you absolutely must use
Stand
decoding
out.
skills. And if
Yep.
you don't have the decoding skills, then you won't get the word.
Oh, I like it.
That's important. Yeah, totally
Yeah,
important. So that's
absolutely.
easy. I call it a quick placement assessment because it takes about 2 to 3 minutes per student to do.
Wow.
So
And
you could do it, yeah, you could do it on day one of class. In fact, I always tell teachers when you're starting the new term or when you're starting the beginning of the year or whenever you do start this, and you don't need to, you don't need to say, oh, well, it's the middle of the year, I'm going to wait till the beginning of the term. No, you can start it right now. I always tell them do it on day one because that's the honeymoon period. Like kids are still acting
beautiful.
nice and beautiful, beautiful on day one.
Yes.
Take advantage of that.
Most of them.
Set up some like hands-on STEM rotations so they can sort of like, stay busy for that 30 minutes that's going to take you to do your whole class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things, it's a time thing, right? Where you're like, oh, it's the first week,
Yeah.
I've got to do a running record and it's going to take me like 20, 30 minutes per kid. Times that
Mhm.
by 30, you're like, there goes my day, there goes my week.
Yep.
But
Yep.
you've created a system. I think of that, oh, that saying, the fox jumped over the quick to work out if your kids can
Yes.
do
The
each
brown
letter.
fox. Yes.
Yes. And it's like you've made a quick placement assessment to identify where students are on that phonics roadmap. So you can
Correct.
clearly assess and go, oh, right, great. I can already group kids in this category and we can start to make progress. And like anything, it's fluid. Once they're making those gains, you're moving them and adjusting
Yep.
them and tweaking them. And I guess you can do that quick assessment again to see if they have actually consolidated that phonic knowledge.
Well, it's funny you should say that because in the lessons that I created, the lessons are 3 days each. So I say a lesson because the lesson goes with the decodable, but you don't have to have the lessons. So there's a lot of schools and districts in the United States that are using my decodables without using the lessons. Like they have their own phonics curriculum,
Yeah.
but they're just using the decodables because they've just taught, let's say they've just taught, NG and NK, and now they're going to take out, or let's just say like SH. They've taught SH through their, like, let's say foundations or their own phonics curriculum program. They've taught SH. Then maybe in that curriculum, maybe there's a worksheet or a passage, but there's not like an actual book. And so I like to say, I mean, I'm showing you, I know the listeners can't see this, but like, then they're going to take out the book
Yeah.
and they're going to read the Shell Shack because the Shell Shack has 37 words with SH patterns in it for them to practice that SH that they were just explicitly taught. And then they're not just going to read the decodable once, they're going to read it probably 1 or 2 times because the lesson rotation I suggest is 3 days and it tells you what to do each day. It's a lot of repetition. Our brain needs a lot of repetition and a lot of patterns. And then they're going to read it after that. Like I try to tell teachers, number one, that the decodable is the protein of the lesson. And number two, that the decodable reading part is like going to the gym and doing reps. Like you don't just go to the gym and like lift a weight and walk out. Like you lift a weight 12 times, you rest, you go back 12 more times, and then you go to the gym tomorrow. And then you go to the gym the day after that. Like you continue to get better and stronger by doing it over and over and over. And since the decodable book only has SH patterns plus previously taught skills, it doesn't have any vowel teams in there at all. Like it only has skills up to that point and no further. There's like 99 to 100% success with kids reading the decodables because they've been taught and have practiced every single pattern that's in the book. The progress monitoring assessments is what you're going to give every 15 days. So a lesson is 3 days long and there's 5 lessons in every set. So every 15 days, you're going to give a progress monitoring assessment, and the progress monitoring assessment is just going to test the 5 to 10 skills in the set you just learned. And that's why we want 90% mastery, because if you're going to move on to say pink 3, you need to know all the skills in pink 1 and all the skills in pink 2, or else you're not going to be successful in the skill set for pink 3.
Wow. I love it. You've got a system in place. So
A system.
A
Yes.
system. I think that's what it's all about. And that's what we love to teach our listeners is that you create a system and a system that works for you. So let's just backtrack a little bit. So we're going to talk literacy swaps. So what are some swaps teachers are going to make to align to literacy instruction to the science of reading? So you've talked about your decodable books and your program. So I guess the first thing is you're going to complete an assessment for each student to ascertain where they are on that roadmap. And then you're going to group your students. And then the literacy swaps you're going to do is
So we've talked about two swaps already. One is assessing for a skill instead of a level. And the second swap is we're going to do skill-based groups instead of guided reading. And then one of the next swaps we're going to do is we're going to swap out our prompting during small groups. And we're going to start prompting at the word level. And we're going to be prompting to things like look at the letters or say the sounds or tap it out or blend instead of saying look at the picture or what would make sense.
Yeah.
So we're going to swap out our prompting.
That's a good one.
The other thing that we're going to swap out, and I actually really love this one, is we're going to swap out memorizing sight words to mapping sight words. And when I say mapping sight words, I mean basically teaching your brain the letter sound correspondence for each word. And the reason for that is, and I've been guilty in the past, and again, there's lots of grace in these transitions, grace on yourself for the way you used to do it and thinking, why isn't this work versus what we know now? And that is, I've been that teacher where I've had flashcards, right? And I've been saying to kids like, when, we, that, what, and they're repeating me and doing all that. And then wondering why the next day they don't remember any of them. And we know now that the brain has 4 centers. And this is the nerdy part where I think lots of teachers, once they know this, it really does click, is that, the brain has 4 centers. And when you think about a baby, it's easier to kind of talk about when you're talk about how you grow up. But when you're a baby and learning to talk, you're learning that oral and speech area of your brain, like what words are like mama, dad, cat, outside. Think about Wellington office words. And then the second part of your brain, when you can tackle like the oral language and saying those words speech-wise, then the second part is the meaning center of your brain, the vocabulary center that says, oh, mama is that person that gives me milk, or cat is the thing that purrs and it's an animal, and you'd have an association and an object and a meaning that goes with that word. Okay, so that's the second area. And then that third area is the letter sound area, that sort of graphophonic area where it says cat is then, so I know how to say cat, I know what a cat is, and then that orthographic or that phonological center says that cat is k, a, t. Okay, those sound, that sound area. And then the orthographic center says that C goes with k and A goes with a and T goes with t, and therefore I can spell cat C-A-T. So we sort of have that speech, meaning, decoding, encoding center. And when we engage all 4 of those centers when learning any new word, whether it's a sight word or a topic word or literally any word, when we can connect those 4 centers, then it literally takes 4 to 8 repetitions of that process to learn that word versus like showing a sight word like 75 times before they learn it. It literally fast tracks that learning. And the more that you can like get it into like hardwire it into your memory and create those neural connections, the more it goes into long-term memory. So it's just automatic retrieval every time they want to read cat or spell cat or read refrigerator and spell refrigerator or whatever the word is. So pretty cool process, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally get what you mean with mapping sight words. And I remember when I was wrapping it up before I had my first baby, and they kind of started to call them heart words, that there might be 1 or 2 parts of that sight word you need to remember. Like, say, if we're doing said, this and the d at the end, you just got to remember that middle, that the AI is making an et sound. That's what you've got to, that's that kind of mapping element of it, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You're so right about that. And there are actually very few words, like said is one of them. Also, love is one of them. Of is another one. The word one, O-N-E, is another one that will never have a rule or an order to it or a rhyme or reason to it. And so those are like what we call true heart words. But everything else is going
decodable.
to eventually be taught. Yes, exactly. So even if the word is this or the word is when, you haven't taught WH yet, but you've taught short E and N. So there's that WH part is even a temporary heart part. And I always tell my kids to put that part in your heart until you learn it in your head. That's going to be when you're right? Like it's
Yeah.
true. Like keep it in your heart until you learn it in your head. Because when you learn WH, which obviously you tell them when you need them to know when at that moment, but because WH hasn't come up on the scope and sequence yet, it eventually will. And so when we make this, we do this fun procedure when they learn WH, we're like, oh, take it out of your heart and put it in your head.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't need to be a heart part anymore. And I always tell teachers too, like it's not even really a heart word. It's really just a sight word with a heart part. Like it's 2/3,
Yeah.
phonetically regular. So yeah.
Awesome. Are there any other literacy spots that we might need to
Yes,
factor
let me
in?
look at my little list. Okay, so here's another literacy swap that's probably a little bit harder for teachers to manage, but it's all in alignment. So Wiley Blevins, who has lots of phonics books, he's written probably 1,800 phonics books. He says that once a phonics skill is explicitly taught, that kids need 4 to 6 weeks of additional practice practicing that skill. And whether that's reading a decodable list, whether that's reading a passage, whether that's doing worksheets, or whether that's reading the decodable book again and again, whether it's doing writing about that book or vocabulary center with the vocabulary words from that book, what's going to happen is that swap is going to need to take place sort of outside that small group table. So if kids at your table are learning, let's say, consonant digraphs, like SH, CH, WH, and they've learned everything up to then everything that they do outside small group table, like at centers or literacy centers, should also reflect the skill level at which they're at.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as like reading around the room with every phonic pattern under the sun. If you're just learning short vowels and let's say you only learned like satpin, then there should not be matching upper and lowercase letters of every letter of the alphabet.
Should just be sat pin.
Yeah, exactly. You should only just be matching upper and lowercase for SATPIN, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's a little more differentiated. That's why I said manageable wise. It's so hard to manage that. However, I do feel like once you understand why that needs to be like that, you will be more intentional with that center planning. Because honestly, the whole thing about centers is that you have additional practice and reinforcement of the skills you've just been taught.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be busy work. It's not meant to go do something while I work with this small group. It's meant to be additional practice. And the beauty of those types of centers that are more aligned to the skills that students are working on is that if they're truly doing things that they can do, they won't be bothering you because they'll know how to do all the things because they, at one, done it with you, and two, they can do it on their own without you because they proved to be able to do it with you.
Yeah. They take that ownership of it, of like, yeah, this is something I know how to do and I'm going to prove I know how to do it. I'm going to practice it. So say you've got teachers who are like, okay, I've got these kids who are, let's just say we'll start with SatPin or, all those digraphs. Yeah. And with that research knowledge of that 4 to 6 weeks, how long are we kind of keeping those kids? Are we hitting that 15-day mark that you're talking about where maybe for 3 weeks we have them doing a similar kind of activity outside of our small group?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you asked that too. And again, I'm not trying to promote my lessons. It's just right now, it's just the one thing that makes so much sense inside and whether you're using my lessons or any lessons really, I just, I know how teachers just pull their hair out trying to curate and, pull things from Pinterest and everything under the sun to try to create a group that's all the essay around all the SH stuff. Your small group lesson should have some phonological awareness, a couple minutes of phonological awareness, and then some sight word mapping, your explicit instruction, which is going to last a couple of minutes, and then it's going to have some decodable word lists that kids have to read. And then it should also have some games and activities. And I call games and activities things that were just really like not necessarily assessing, or the word chains could be in there. Some sound sorts could be in there. Like this one has this, there's a sound sort for this one. You're going to have some new vocabulary words that you're going to learn. You're also going to have some vocabulary that you're going to teach. Now, these vocabulary words are the beauty of these vocabulary words is that these are like, for example, I'm showing you all the lesson from lesson 31, which is called Dolphin Family, where we teach PH. And so all of the words that are, sorry, it keeps going in and out. And I know this is just for you, but all the vocabulary words in the story, I'll read them off. Hobby, microphone, alphabet, photography, orthography, opportunity, adopted, orphan, yonder cove, and phantom.
Wow.
Those are vocabulary words that are in the story Dolphin Family that kids will be able to decode because they've had all the patterns up to that point, but they just might not know what those words mean.
Yeah.
And that's why we really need to make sure that, yes, we want them to be able to code them, but we also want them to know what it means and use it farther. And so there's going to be additional games and practice in the lesson. And we want kids, like ideally, and I recommend this for all teachers doing all types of skill groups, is that students bring a small group skill folder to the group with them, like a two-pocket folder. And then all the games and things and word lists that teachers give them to read during the lesson and all their sorts and their dictation sheets. We do dictation as well every day. We have one dictation sheet for all 3 days. And on day 1, we dictate sounds. On day 2, we dictate words. And on day 3, we dictate a sentence. And so they are building on that dictation sheet. But after the game is played, like how often do teachers do things with kids at small groups and then collect up that paper and put it on a table behind their small group?
Yeah.
But honestly, couldn't we just give all of that stuff back to the kids and say, here's your decodable book for the week. Here's your word list. Here's your vocabulary cards. Here's your sound sort. Here's your word chain. Here's your dictation sheet. You go play the games without me.
Yeah.
So now they have their own sort of small group center folder with all the things. And I don't know about you, but kids could do it independently. Kids could go and play school at the small group area.
I'm seeing my daughters right now. They would be loving this.
Yes, absolutely. So you put all of those resources back in their hands and empower them to say, this is your work. These are your games. These are your lists. This is your dictation sheet. If you want a blank one, the stack is over there. Like empower them to sort of have ownership, literally and figuratively, of everything that they just learned in their own small group folder.
Yeah, I love that. That makes sense. Like to my brain, I go, yeah, that totally makes sense. It's how I was operating things in my reading sessions, but now it's kind of like you're just fine tuning it to be a folder for that whole group per se, working on that sound. And it's like their own learning package. I loved the vocabulary cards you were showing me there. I loved how you have a beautiful photograph to go with every single word. So like you're talking about how your brain learns with that oral, that meaning, that letter, the decoding, that you are combining all that there so they can go yonder cove is...
Yonder cove.
I can see it. I can put that picture in my head. I can make those connections there with the sounds and graphics.
It's funny that you... Yes, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that. So I've actually included for teachers like a little definition in case teachers are like...
Down the very bottom under the picture.
Yes. And so like because you're kind of in the moment, you're like, well, first of all, you're thinking off the top of your head if you don't know what, and there could be words like we all know what these words mean, adults do. But in the moment, you're like, how do I explain opportunity to these kids in 3 seconds or less, right?
I know. It's like my daughter is always like, what does this word mean? I'm like, I know what it means for me, but I'm like, I look at my husband, I'm like, you're so much better at this than me, babes, go with it.
Exactly. So it says like a chance for a better situation. But like on Yonder Cove, which, I mean, being in Australia, you all have like, I know that 90% of Australians live like on the coast of around the Burma of Australia, but because it's from one of the fiction stories, it says that it's a fictional small bay in the shoreline of the sea, and like those are all terms that teachers would relate to on the spot. They're like, oh, over on the Gold Coast, there's that beach where there's the rocks and blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, I love it.
Yes. Oh, and let me say one more thing about that center is that if you, as a teacher, also what I recommend, and I've seen teachers do this and it's perfect, is they take, while they have the vocabulary cards ready for the small group, she also has another set over at the vocabulary center or the vocabulary area. And they're basically just bins with all the vocabulary cards in there for like, it might just be numbered or it might say pink 3 words or pink 4 words or orange words or whatever. And then kids could go to the book. Kids could be heterogeneously grouped even at the vocabulary center and the writing center, because the vocabulary template is like a 3-column chart where they have to write the word, the meaning, and a sketch of it. But if I'm in pink 3, then I'm going to go to the vocabulary center and I'm going to pull the pink 3 cards. But if you are in a more advanced group like yellow 4, let's say, and you have this also the same template, but you're going to go grab the yellow 4 cards. So you
Yeah.
can still all work together at the vocabulary center. And that same also goes for the writing extension. So every story has a writing extension that says, read Dolphin Family again and write what you learned about Dolphin Family. And this is not, the vocabulary sheet and the writing sheet are actually not done during group with the
No.
teacher. They're handed to the child and said,
Yeah.
okay, when you go to centers, when you have center time, you're going to keep this in your folder, but you can go to the writing center and write what's happening in the Dolphin Family, or you can do your vocabulary meaning definitions and meanings and sketches. And it doesn't matter what kids are on, because they're going to take the sheet that they're on
Yeah.
and get the cards that they need, and they can still all be working together at the same time.
That's great. Yeah, you kind of cater for it with their folder to go do what they need to do in that week that they have centers. And it's going to do that whole consolidating, that repetition. They're going to be doing those reps at the gym and becoming superstar readers.
That's right. That's right. I don't know if you know this, but I know Ashley knows this, but like we have friends that live in Australia, and that's why we've been to Australia 3 or 4 times already. Well, pre-COVID. But Dimity, my Australian daughter who lives right outside Brisbane, she was trying to find me a printer in Australia to like print these for me.
Yeah.
For in like Australian spellings. But I know you have good decodables and you have systems, and I don't know what percentage of Australian teachers have sort of like made these shifts yet, because it's probably like the United States. Like we are just now getting states to pass legislation. I think there's 33 out of 50 states have science of reading legislation, but not all of them. You know how it is in education. Everything is such a slow rollout, slow transition. It's going to take years before everybody's on the
board.
science of reading train. Yeah.
So, which is my next question, because not all teachers have control over curriculum choices. Like I know at the school I was at, which was about 5 years ago, they were just starting to bring decodables in and starting to make the shift. But it's not like that in every single school. So what advice do you have for educators who want to implement the science of reading practices but are required to use materials that may not be fully aligned? What's your top tips?
So the top tips, and it's happening over here as well. Like I just had a teacher, she wrote me very frustrated, and she said, she's like the K2 like cadre leader. And she said, my principal is making all the K2 teachers give a weekly reading comprehension assessment. And we know it's wrong. We know we haven't taught everything, all the words, and what do we do, what do we say? And the biggest thing I can say about this is to just read up on it yourself, like know the lingo and the language so that you kind of become an authority on it. And then you can try to coach up the principal and educate them, because principals are really caught up in data. They're really caught up in data-driven decisions. They're really caught up in school improvement plans, school board agendas, about funding and money. Like it's really a grassroots effort when it comes to like teachers really trying to show administrators and district curriculum leaders this actually isn't the best practice anymore. And if you can sort of tell it to them behind closed doors or not publicly, most of them actually would appreciate knowing, hey, okay, and maybe if you can hand over a research article, or like I have created on my website, I've created a statement of evidence sheet that says, these are all of the components of a small group lesson. They're aligned to the National Reading Panel and this research and that research. And here's the state compliance addendum to show how it aligns to all the laws in our state. Like I've created that for every state. I'm trying the best I can to hand on a silver platter to teachers, to something to hand to principals to show them. But if teachers can walk the walk in their classroom and know what's right, but if you can't talk the talk, you're just not convincing enough for the principal or the administrator to like really believe you or know why. They don't have time to learn the new research. They don't have time to learn that giving a reading assessment to a K2 student is not a best practice. If that's what you want them to do, then you're really not assessing what that outcome is going to give you because, a reading comprehension assessment is only an assessment if the child has read every word themselves. And if they're not decoding accurately and if they're not fluent, then their entire brain is focused on decoding and not comprehending. And say that's the problem we know now with balanced literacy and level text is that, we say to kids, okay, here's a book for you to read and it's on grade level. So it's in your range. Like you should be able to read it. But if you can't, it's okay. If you can't, it's okay. But do your best. And then they feel bad and frustrated. It happened to my own daughter. I mean, she was a victim of all this stuff and, in special ed her whole life. And, she couldn't read all the level text that they were giving her. But on the other hand, I said to this one teacher, I said, at this point, all you're really doing, if you're reading the test to them and reading the questions to them, then all you're really assessing at this point is listening comprehension.
Yeah.
And I said, and on top of it, what if there's words in it like hawk and eagle and fruit and flood, and they haven't been taught EA or AW or UI or O yet, and you haven't taught them that? And I said, so is it really fair to assess kids on reading something, on something they haven't been taught yet? Like that makes no sense. Why would you even do that? And so sometimes you do have to sort of break it down like that for administrators.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I'm going to assess you on something. I haven't taught you all 19 components yet, only 10 so far, but just do your best on everything. And they're like, well, wait, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So you're suggesting you need to go in with some strategy. One, know your administrator and know the best approach.
Yes.
So probably not in a staff meeting, organize a time to chat with them. And
never publicly.
Yep. Go on to Jen Jones's website, even for our Aussie friends, get some evidence, do some research, even if it's using a expert like yourself to get some of the facts so that you have evidence to back up the reason for why we need to start doing things differently, why we need to bring more decodables in, or why this form of assessment isn't going to sufficiently allow us to ascertain our kids' reading abilities. It is.
Yes, absolutely. And it sometimes takes for us too, if we don't understand it ourselves, we're going to have a hard time convincing somebody.
Yes.
And if we don't understand the why behind switching from level text to decodables, we aren't going to convince anybody. And there's a YouTube video that your listeners should watch if they are in that boat where they just aren't sure why we're switching out of level text and into decodable text. And it's called The Purple Project. And it's a video about a mom who took a leveled book and on day one asked her daughter to read the leveled book and just opened it up and the pictures and the words and say, okay, read the book. She read the book, like looking at the pictures and guessing and all that stuff. And I think she got like 85% accurate. And then the mom said, okay, now she had to read the book the next day and covered up the pictures and then said, okay, like now read the sentences. And the little girl's like, I don't know, I can't read it now because you covered up the pictures. She's like, just do your best. Well, then her accuracy went down to 60%. And then on day 3, she took the sentences and cut them all apart. So they were just words scattered on the page. And her decoding was like 30%.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, they really don't. They aren't, leveled readers were never written to practice phonics skills.
Yeah.
So you're asking one thing to do the job of the other, and it's just not jiving that way. So decodable books were created as a tool to practice the phonics skill that you were just taught, whereas level text and predictable text were not written for phonics. They were written to teach story and teach about life and going to the park and fruit salad and the train station and the doctor and the dentist and restaurants. So you're giving kids a level B or C book called restaurants and they haven't even been taught AU yet and expect them to read a 3-syllable word. But they aren't. You've just told them it's about restaurants and it's a really long word, restaurants, and they see this long word. So guess what they say?
Restaurant.
Right.
That is helpful for us in terms of do a bit of research. We'll link all that Jen has shared, that YouTube video. I'm going to go find it. I'm going to go watch it myself. So you've given us a wealth of knowledge. Let's play a game, hey? Let's play a yay or nay. I'm going to give you some common literacy practices. Could you let us know if they're aligned with the science of reading or not? And you are welcome to elaborate on why it's a yay or a nay if you like. So let's run with the first one, running reading groups daily or literacy centres daily.
I'm going to say nay because we should never make schedules based on the calendar. Groups need to be based on need. And depending on your schedule, it would never be the same for everybody. So maybe you only have time for 3 rotations, where the next teacher has time for 2 rotations. Maybe one teacher has a teaching assistant who could also run a group. So you're going to have to, maybe some kids need it daily and some kids don't. So again, group should be based on, the timing of group should be based on need, not on a schedule or a calendar.
Love it. Calling words, tricky words, i.e. sight words.
So that is what, tricky words. I'd say nay.
Yeah.
Tricky is probably not the best word to call that, because technically they're probably all phonetically regular or on the road to being phonetically regular. So no, let's not say tricky.
What are we going to call them? We're just going to call them words.
Yes, we're just going to call them words. We can call them sight words. I like calling them heart words until they're not a heart word anymore. You know, the only until they move into your head. The only thing about heart words is that it is with the caveat that it isn't going to stay a heart word forever. This is important to remember. Every word wants to grow up and become a sight word.
Yeah.
Words don't start out as sight words. They end up as sight words.
I like it. All right. The term instructional reading level.
Nay.
Nay. Yes.
Good.
Weekly spelling tests.
Nay, no.
What should we replace them with? You shared before.
Yes, we need to replace them with dictation.
Yep.
You need to be working on the skill, learning how to decode and encode that phonics skill, both. And if kids can spell a word, they can read the word. If they can read the word, it doesn't automatically mean they can spell it. So our instruction, our small group instruction, that's why we have writing bits in there, because writing and encoding is taking speech and converting it to print and knowing when to use that skill and having an awareness of that spelling pattern and knowing if we're going to spell it one way at the beginning of a word, a different way at the end of the word, a different way in the middle of the word. We're going to spell it a certain way depending on if it's by a vowel or not, knowing the ins and outs of the English language. And that's why I love the book, The Logic of English. I highly recommend that book. That's a really good one for teachers to learn the rules. Mm-hmm. And then that generalizations book, it's written in the 70s. I love this. Of course, I don't love the title, but it's called The ABCs and All Their Tricks.
ABCs and All Their Tricks. Oh, yeah.
So this one in here is basically it's a reference book. It's definitely not one you're going to read on your nightstand at night or anything like that. But one of the things about this spelling and science of reading sort of mindset that teachers need to have is we need to stop saying to kids, well, you just have to learn it. It just, when C and G are before E, I, or Y, they're going to be soft. You just have to learn it. We have to stop saying that. We have to tell them why it's doing that, when it's doing that, and have more ownership of the learning process of the language with kids, and say, if kids ask us a question like, why is there an S in island? Why is that? Instead of saying, I don't know, you just have to learn how to spell it that way, so write it down. We have to stop saying it is, it just is, just have to learn it. We have to say, that's a great question. Let's find out and figure out why and look it up and learn it and be kind of in the learning part with them instead of just telling kids all the time. It just is, we just have to learn it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be like, just some random guy thought he'd put an S there for laughs, Right. There's usually some form of logic to why something is done the way that it's done. So I love that.
And a lot of it goes back to Old English and Middle English and Greek and Latin and all those borrowed words from when France took over England for a short bit there in the in the 1100s. King of France told the people of England, you have to learn to speak French. And so royalty said, okay, sure, we'll do it. And then the people, the peasants were like, no, screw that. We're not doing that. But that's why we have words like chauffeur and charcuterie board and chandelier. That's why we have those words in English now, because some of them stuck.
There you go. Thank you for that quick little history lesson. Always welcome. All right, we've got a few more. I think I already know the answer for this one. Running records?
Nope.
Going to replace it with something like your process monitoring, right? Or placement assessment?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that. So that's going to be initially to check their phonics level and know which skills they're at. However, what we're going to do instead of MSV, instead of error analysis, we're going to analyze their error types. They're error
Oh,
types, which is like deletions, omissions, insertions, reversals, substitutions, rule confusion, things like that.
yeah. Then you know where to go next on their roadmap.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yep.
And we're going to give corrective feedback to it. So if a child says, like, let's say they say spot instead of stop, we're going to realize that they have some reversals with that. And we're going to go right back to correcting it right then and there. We're going to have them tap it out right then and there, hear the sounds in order. Or if a child says, like, knit instead of mit or something, that's not a good example because of the K, but we could like get out that M card, that letter card with the keyword and say, mouse, mit,
Yeah.
mouse or whatever. Take that keyword card out and like repeat it again or whatever. Like we wouldn't just let it go. We would give corrective feedback right in the moment.
Which we know is highly beneficial and the
Mhm.
way that you learn and can move
Right.
on.
And right, move on and like make progress.
Absolutely. All right. We got three more. Picture of the day.
Yes. Yes, we are still doing picture of the day because picture of the day increases oral language. It increases visual literacy. It increases vocabulary. It increases our cognitive comprehension skills of inferring, predicting, also visual analysis skills of setting, character, paying attention to weather, scenery, architecture, all those cognitive skills that kids need to be responsible for once they learn how to read their words on themselves. But what you're doing is you're just like relieving the decoding burden, but still practicing those cognitive skills. So they're going to be able to transfer those same skills they've been practicing with a picture once they start reading and making their own picture in their mind.
Yeah, it's like when you're talking about how the brain works, right? The picture of the
Mhm.
day is really working on that oral language component and that meaning and vocabulary
Mhm.
of them making
Mhm.
that connection of, that's a beach and that's what a beach looks like. So now I'm ready to move on to the sounds that make beach.
Absolutely. And paying attention to like illustration, facial expressions, and body language. In the book, The Lotus Seed, there's a picture of the emperor and he's standing away from the town and he's got his head in his hands and he's looking pretty shameful, but none of the words say that. So you have to teach kids to pay attention to like, why is his head down? What do
Yeah.
you think is happening? Look at the clouds, they're dark, there's symbolism in the clouds. Like we teach them that stuff now so that it's not suddenly they're reading this book and it doesn't say he's ashamed or it doesn't say he lost his throne. Like what is happening is the way he's, acting and standing and the symbolism congruent with the story. So like that integration of illustrations and what the text is saying too.
Absolutely. I love a picture of the day. Online readers. Your thoughts on
Online
that one?
readers. Well, that's interesting because I don't know what's happening over in Australia, but like technology and screens are becoming a big no-no over here.
Hmm.
Like they're doing like lots of reverse courses and going back to paper pencil and no logins. And there's a lot of the AI state now where it's like who's actually watching and surveilling like what you're doing and your logins and who's getting access. And so right now, currently in this moment, there's a lot of backpedaling with technology, putting kids online. Really, if you're just talking about a Kindle, I would say absolutely. But if it's on a computer or an iPad, there's just, especially for young kids, their brain is still forming. And it's sad. I read the other day that there's a first grade teacher that her students came in and they were holding a book and she asked them to read the book and they started swiping the pages like an iPad and they didn't know how to
Oh,
they
wow.
didn't know how to turn the page because all they were trying to do is like swipe the page. They didn't
Yeah.
even know how to like basic concepts of print. They know how to like turn the page.
Mm. I think like anything with technology, it's a balance. And
Yep.
with the science of reading, we're
Yep.
got research and we're learning. And with
Yeah.
that information, we're changing, we're adjusting. And it's the same with how we approach online readers is that
Yes.
it's a balance. So I guess it's kind of like a yay, nay. It's like
You're correct. It depends the circumstances.
absolutely. And lastly, reading books just for fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And it's funny that you say that too, because with my grandsons, well, especially with Wellington, who's 2 now, we have been reading to him since day one. He has a stack of 6 books that are on his table, but he has a crib at my house and we have a recliner and we have books on the table. And then he has books in the living room and he's really into frogs. We have lots of frog books and farm books and he loves to read and be read to. And he doesn't know how to read any of the words. And a lot of those words are rich picture books like brown bear, but he he doesn't know the OW pattern. He's not actually reading them. And so we do need to have positive associations
With it.
around reading. Start with that sort of that nurturing of, come get in my lap and read the book. And like we've read Sheep in a Jeep and Dog on a Trike and, the Hoo Hoo book and Brown Bear a million times. And he wants to keep reading them over and over and over. And I just keep reading them. And, he gets to the uh-oh page in the, where in the
Yeah.
Dog on a Trike, where they're all up there and flying it up into the sky. And he's like, uh-oh, because he does that. And where the Jeep is going into the mud. And he's like, uh-oh, every time. Like he knows.
Yes.
Jeep should not be and he loves it. And so, yes, we need to keep on with just reading just for fun, because there's so many statistics out there that once kids get out of high school, they never read for fun ever again. And that's really sad to me.
That
That
is
just breaks my heart.
agreed. Read books for
And
fun.
here's the thing. I have a new quote bubble. I was making quote bubbles a long time ago, but my new quote bubble is reading is more fun when you know how.
Oh,
So if you know how to read, if you were taught how to read, then reading for fun is going to be something you want to do, not something
yeah,
that somebody's going to make you do.
absolutely. I love my reading. It's my daily ritual.
Mhm.
Reading is more fun when you know how. Great. Tell me, I've got one last question. I know we did touch on this. If you could tell school leaders one thing to help support teachers in implementing the science of reading aligned literacy instruction, what would it be? Let them.
Well, yes, I would say that to be open to teachers that want to try and pilot new things. I would remember I used to go to my principal and I would say, hey, I want to divert from the box curriculum and I want to try this, and I'm going to come to you in a quarter and I'm going to show you the results. So be open, give teachers an I blew it card or permission to fail or
Mm-hmm.
permission to try and pilot something. Because if teachers feel like they are going to get in trouble or they're going to be downgraded or marked down on their, scorecard or whatever, their evaluation, then who's going to try new things?
Mm,
So teachers need permission to try these new things and possibly fail. And how much growth comes from failure? A
a
ton,
lot.
a lot. If that growth mindset is good enough for kids, then it should be good enough for teachers and principals too.
I reckon that's great words of wisdom there. So tell us, how do our lovely listeners connect with the amazing Jen
Ah,
Jones?
well, I still don't have a podcast. I don't even know if I would even have time to do that. But at this point in time, I'm on Instagram the most, Hello Literacy on Instagram. And then my new website is hellodecodables.com.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's where you're going to download all those freebies that I was talking about, because at the tab at the top says freebie library. And there are lots of goodies there. All those assessments we talked about are there. Of course, I still have my TPT store, which I sell everything in printable format there. So all the decodables are in digital format. All the lesson plans are in digital format there. It's not super fun to plan and prep all that and print it, but
But it's
when
there
it's
if you want
but
to.
it's there if you want it. And once
Absolutely.
it's done. Like, obviously, I was telling you, like, I keep all my lessons in two pocket folder. So
Yep.
when I'm getting ready to teach, I just open up the folder and everything's there. So, I mean, I know Australian teachers. I follow a ton of them, and I know that they love to have everything prepped and ready to go. And once
Oh,
it's done, you
it's
never have to prep it again.
short-term pain for long-term gain. That's how it
Exactly.
is. I'm going to go scouring your Hello Decodable website. My two youngest are now in kindy and pre-primary, and we're starting the reading journey. My eldest loves books. Like, she's loved books since day dot. She could listen to audiobooks all day. She's got an amazing ability to comprehend and tell stories. But
I love that.
she's got this reluctance to learn to read. It's like this little roadblock. And I was saying to her on the bed the other day, I just said, babes, are you super excited? You're going to learn to read this year. And she looked at me like, what? I am? I went, absolutely. And she's like, all right, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
But
Oh my gosh, I love that.
yes.
Well, I'm actually just launching this week. I'm launching like what I'm calling an ambassador program, it's like an affiliate program. So there are teachers in the States. I already have probably 10 or 15 of them right now, but teachers that are using Hello Decodables, and then like they get a code for their followers and then they get a 10% commission.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so if any of your teachers are interested, like I know that I mean I can ship books to Australia. That's it's a little bit more expensive, but I mean I'd be happy to, if anybody wants to become obsessed with Hello Decodables, I'll be more than happy to onboard you as a Hello Literacy ambassador. send you some books.
Awesome. Good to know. And if there's any teachers that are listening, we'll have that all linked in the show notes. Now, we have a little tradition where a previous guest has left a question for the next guest. We're going to finish on this question. And I always love these questions. It gets me thinking too. Jen, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
My younger self. I would tell myself that not everything has to be perfect. And that's a good one because now that I'm a TPT seller and a creator of all things, I have learned that perfection isn't profitable. And I learned that from Dimity, actually. She taught me, she said, Jen,
just
upload it. You're done. You could tweak it all day long. Like, forget it, be done. And perfection isn't profitable. And I do, being a type A and kind of a D type personality, like a doer, I will fiddle with it until it's perfect. And you know what? It costs me time. You know, everything is going to cost you one way or another, I say. It's going to cost you time, money, or stress. And so one way or another, you're going to pay for it. So just, it's okay. Let it go.
Just do it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
I'm going to add there. It's going to time, money, stress, or joy. It's going to take your joy. And it's like,
that's right. That's right.
So to our fellow perfectionist friends out there, just lighten up and just do it.
Yeah.
Do that thing you've been wanting to do
that
and
thing.
You won't regret it. Promise.
Yes, absolutely.
Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on our podcast, Rainbow's Guides for Teachers. And I'm already looking forward to the next time you're on the podcast.
Yes, I would love to. Let's not make it so long next time.
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Thanks for choosing to listen to Rainbow's Guides for Teachers, the go-to show dedicated to teachers who want to make a big difference in education.
If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review or share the episode with a friend. Because together we're
unstoppable.